I am Carly Monroe, 32, and literally last weekend my rep as the family glue? Yeah, it totally backfired. The foundation I'd worked my butt off to keep solid? It blew up into a full-on family meltdown at the county courthouse. My half-sister Vanessa straight up demanded I wear a badge labeling me nobody, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You're embarrassing us all," she yelled, with everyone staring like I'd just crashed a funeral. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Brim Revenge. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now back to the story. My heels clicked on the courthouse steps, each step heavier than the last, like I was marching to my own execution. The air smelled of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where truth was supposed to win, but often got buried under money and lies. I'd come to support my family in a legal dispute over our foundation. Dad's legacy, the one thing that kept us tethered despite years of resentment. I adjusted my blazer, smoothing out wrinkles that didn't exist, a nervous tic I'd picked up as a kid when Mom would scold me for looking less than. Vanessa, my half-sister, stood by the entrance, her designer heels gleaming, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She held out a badge, the word nobody scrawled in bold red marker. "Wear it," she said, voice low, like she was daring me to argue. My fingers twitched, wanting to crumple it, but eyes were already on us. Cousins, uncles, strangers in suits. I pinned it to my chest, the plastic digging into my skin, each letter burning like a brand. Vanessa's smirk widened, and she turned away, her perfume lingering like a taunt. My stomach churned, but I straightened, refusing to slouch. I'd spent years swallowing their jabs, their dismissal of my late-night spreadsheets and donor calls that kept the foundation alive. Dad had believed in me once before the cancer took him. His will named me executive director, but Vanessa's charm had swayed the family to her side. As I stepped into the courtroom, the badge felt heavier, but so did my resolve. I wasn't here to play their game, I was here to end it. The bailiff called the room to order, and I sat, heart pounding, knowing this wasn't just about a badge. It was about who I'd been, who I was, and who I'd fight to become. The courtroom's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but my mind drifted back to memories that stung more than Vanessa's bat. Growing up, I was the quiet kid who fixed things. Broken toys, family arguments, the foundation's crumbling budget. At 16, I'd stay up past midnight, balancing the foundation's books while Mom and Vanessa planned galas. I'd present my reports at family meetings, my voice steady despite the nervous sweat on my palms. "Good effort, Carly," Mom would say, her eyes already on Vanessa, who'd waltz in with a new sponsorship deal and steal the room. Vanessa's wins, landing a celebrity donor, getting her photo in the local paper, were framed as triumphs. My spreadsheets? Background work, Dad's brother would mutter, waving me off. I'd bite my lip, nodding, while my chest tightened. At 22, I secured a $50,000 grant for the foundation, spending weeks on the proposal, my fingers cramped from typing. At the celebration dinner, Vanessa took credit, claiming she'd sealed the deal with her charm. The family clapped, their wine glasses clinking, while I sat at the table's end, picking at my salad. "You're too serious, Carly," my cousin whispered, like it was a flaw. I'd go home, replaying their words, wondering why my work was invisible. By 28, I'd streamlined the foundation's outreach, doubling our community programs. Yet, at Dad's funeral, Vanessa's eulogy, polished, tearful, got the applause, while my quiet efforts to fund the service went unnoticed. I'd stand by his coffin, my hands clasped so tight my nails left marks, promising to keep his vision alive. Back in the courtroom, the badge's weight pulled at my blazer. Those years of being overlooked weren't just memories, they were the fuel behind every late night, every ignored email. Vanessa could have her spotlight, her smug glances across the aisle. I'd learned to work in the shadows, and that's where I'd built something they couldn't ignore. The judge's gavel snapped me back, her voice calling for opening statements. My fingers brushed the badge, and I straightened. Not out of habit, but defiance. They'd spent years pretending I didn't matter, but I'd been keeping score. Not just of their slights, but of every donor I'd won, every program I'd saved. The courtroom felt smaller now, their stares less heavy. I wasn't the kid begging for a nod anymore, I was the one they'd underestimated, and today, that would cost them. The courtroom's murmurs faded as I sank into the memory of my secret triumph, the one nobody in this room suspected. 3 years ago I'd hit a breaking point. The foundation was bleeding money. Vanessa's galas cost more than they raised, and her strategic partnerships were just photo ops. I'd lie awake at 2 a.m., my laptop's glow burning my eyes, crunching numbers that screamed disaster. Then came the aha moment, a donor email mentioning a federal grant for community outreach. It was a long shot, but I dove in. For months I worked in secret, holed up in my tiny apartment, coffee mugs piling up. I'd draft proposals, my fingers shaking from exhaustion, rewriting each line until it was perfect. I'd pace, muttering arguments to imaginary grant boards, my voice cracking as I practiced. The stakes were brutal. If I failed, the foundation would collapse, and Dad's legacy with it. I hid my work from the family, knowing Vanessa would sabotage it. When the email came, $500,000 awarded, I sat on my couch, staring at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't cheer, I just closed my laptop, my hands trembling, and whispered, "We're safe." I funneled the money into anonymous accounts, restructuring the foundation's programs without taking credit. I'd check the balances late at night, my heart swelling as shelters stayed open, kids got meals, and Dad's dream lived on. Vanessa never noticed, she was too busy posing for magazines. My secret wasn't just the grant, it was the power I'd built, piece by piece, in the shadows. Back in the courtroom, the badge on my chest felt like a joke. They thought they could label me nobody, but I'd saved what they were fighting over. My fingers tapped my knee, a restless rhythm as Vanessa's lawyer droned on, painting her as the foundation's savior. I caught her eye, her smug nod, and my jaw tightened. She had no idea what I'd done, what I was capable of. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable, and I felt a spark of hope. My secret wasn't just a win, it was a weapon, waiting for the right moment. I shifted in my seat, the wooden bench creaking, my resolve hardening. They'd spent years ignoring me, but I'd built something undeniable. Today wasn't just about surviving their games, it was about proving I'd already won. The morning of the court hearing, I stood in my apartment staring at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. My blazer hung crisp, but my hands shook as I knotted my scarf, the silk slipping through my fingers. Today was about Dad's foundation, the legal dispute over its control, but I knew it was also a battlefield for my family's grudges. Vanessa had texted last night, "Don't embarrass us in court." I'd deleted it, my thumb pressing the screen too hard, but the words lingered like a bruise. I was there to support the foundation, to honor Dad's will naming me executive director, but doubt gnawed at me. Would they twist this into another chance to bury me? I grabbed my keys, the metal cold against my palm, and headed out, the city's hum barely registering. The foundation was on the brink of a major federal review, one I'd orchestrated in secret to secure its future funding. If it passed, we'd expand programs tenfold. Dad's dream realized. But the family's infighting threatened to derail it. In the Uber, I scrolled through old emails, my heart sinking at Vanessa's name on every press release I'd written for her. I'd let her take credit to keep the peace, but today felt different. The courthouse loomed ahead, gray and unyielding, and I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. I wasn't just walking into a legal dispute, I was stepping into a trap. Vanessa's smile would be waiting, her allies, our cousins, aunts, ready to nod along. I'd come anyway, because Dad's will wasn't just a document, it was his trust in me. As the car stopped, I smoothed my blazer again, a reflex, and stepped out, the air sharp with early fall chill. My phone buzzed, a donor confirming the review meeting tomorrow. I typed a quick reply, my fingers steady despite the knot in my stomach. Inside, Vanessa would try to break me, but I'd built too much to crumble. The courthouse doors loomed, and I straightened, my heels clicking with purpose. This wasn't just about today's ruling, it was about proving I belonged, not as their nobody, but as the one who'd kept Dad's legacy alive. The courthouse lobby was a blur of suits and whispers as I stepped inside, my pulse hammering in my ears. Vanessa stood near the courtroom doors, her manicured nails tapping her phone, her eyes locking onto me like a hawk spotting prey. "Carly," she said, voice syrupy, holding out the nobody badge. My stomach twisted, but I took it, my fingers brushing the cheap plastic, the red marker bleeding slightly at the edges. "It's for clarity," she added, her smile tight, "so everyone knows your role." Around us, cousins and family friends glanced over, some smirking, others looking away. I pinned the badge to my blazer, my hands steady despite the heat creeping up my neck. The word burned against my chest, each letter a jab at years of being sidelined. "Let's go," Vanessa said, striding ahead, her heels clicking like a metronome. I followed, the badge drawing stares from strangers in the hall, lawyers, clerks, a janitor who paused his mop to gawk. My jaw clenched, but I kept my chin up, refusing to let my shoulders slump. Inside the courtroom, the air was stale, the wooden benches packed with our family's allies. My cousin Mark whispered something to his wife, his eyes flicking to my badge, and she stifled a laugh. I sat in the back row, my fingers tracing the badge's edge, the plastic sharp enough to nick my thumb. Vanessa took her place at the plaintiff's table, her posture perfect, her diamond earrings catching the light. She didn't look back, but I felt her smugness like a weight. The bailiff called for order, and the judge, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, scanned the room. My heart thudded as I caught Vanessa's lawyer passing her a folder, their heads bent together, plotting. They weren't just here to win control of the foundation, they were here to bury me. My fingers curled into my palms, nails biting skin, as I remembered every late night I'd spent saving what they now claimed. The badge was a cheap trick, but it wouldn't define me. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the judge, ready for whatever Vanessa threw next. She thought she'd humiliate me into silence, but I was done shrinking. The courtroom's silence was suffocating as Vanessa's lawyer stood, his voice smooth and deliberate, holding a manila folder like a weapon. "Your Honor," he began, "Carly Monroe's history of mental instability makes her unfit to influence the Foundation's future." My breath caught, my fingers gripping the bench, the wood cool under my palms. He slid a document across the table and I recognized the hospital letterhead, my confidential mental health records from a decade ago, when I'd checked myself in for anxiety after Dad's diagnosis. My heart pounded, each beat a hammer against my ribs, as the judge skimmed the pages. Vanessa sat poised, her lips twitching into a faint smile, avoiding my gaze. The room blurred, family members leaning forward, their whispers like static. "She's unreliable," the lawyer continued, "a liability to the Foundation's legacy." I wanted to scream that those records were private, that I'd rebuilt myself stronger, but my throat tightened, words trapped. My badge nobody felt like it was glowing, branding me for all to see. My cousin Leela glanced back, her eyes wide with pity, and I looked away, my nails digging into my thighs. The lawyer's voice droned on, twisting my past into a narrative of weakness, claiming Vanessa's steady leadership was the only path forward. I remembered those hospital days, crying in a sterile room, promising myself I'd never let fear win again. I'd kept that promise, building the Foundation's programs in secret, but now they were using my lowest moment to erase me. The judge's pen scratched notes, her face unreadable, and I felt exposed like my skin had been peeled back. Vanessa finally met my eyes, her expression cold, triumphant, as if she'd already won. My hands trembled, but I forced them still, pressing them flat against my knees. They thought this would break me, that I'd crumble under their stares and lies. But I'd survived worse than their betrayal. I'd survived myself. The lawyer sat, his folder closed with a snap, and the room waited for the judge's response. My pulse raced, but something shifted inside me, a spark of defiance. They could drag my past into this room, but they couldn't rewrite what I'd built. I straightened, the badge's weight no longer crushing, ready for the fight to turn. The courtroom's tension was a tightrope, and I was barely holding on when the doors swung open, cutting through the silence like a blade. A woman in a sharp blazer strode in, her badge glinting, Department of Justice. My heart stuttered as she approached the bench, her voice crisp. "Your Honor, I have evidence that demands immediate attention." She handed over a thick folder, her eyes scanning the room, lingering on Vanessa, who froze, her perfect posture cracking. The judge raised an eyebrow, flipping through pages as the investigator spoke. Vanessa Monroe illegally accessed Carly Monroe's confidential mental health records and embezzled $300,000 from the Foundation's accounts. Gasps rippled through the room. My uncle coughed, my cousin Mark's jaw dropped. Vanessa's hands gripped the table, knuckles white, her earlier smirk gone. My fingers brushed the nobody badge, its weight suddenly trivial. The investigator detailed wire transfers, forged signatures, and hidden accounts Vanessa had siphoned for personal use. Luxury vacations, designer clothes. I sat rigid, my pulse racing, as memories of my late-night budget fixes flooded back. I'd noticed discrepancies, small at first, but dismissed them, trusting Vanessa's lies about donor adjustments. The judge's voice cut in, sharp. "Miss Monroe, explain this," Vanessa stammered, her eyes darting to her lawyer, who looked like he'd swallowed glass. "I didn't," she started, but the investigator wasn't done. "We also found evidence Miss Monroe hacked Carly's records to discredit her claim to the foundation." My chest tightened, not with fear but fury. She hadn't just humiliated me, she'd broken laws to do it. The room spun, faces blurring, but I locked eyes with the judge, her gaze steady, assessing. My hands unclenched, resting on my lap as the truth sank in. Vanessa's house of cards was collapsing. The investigator stepped back, and the courtroom buzzed. My family's whispers now aimed at Vanessa. I felt a strange calm, like the air after a storm. They'd tried to erase me, but the truth was louder than their lies. The judge tapped her gavel, calling for order, and I leaned forward, my breath steady. This wasn't just a revelation. It was my chance to rewrite the story they'd forced on me. The courtroom's buzz hushed as I stood, my legs steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. Vanessa's face was pale, her eyes wide, darting between me and the judge like a trapped animal. The nobody badge hung on my blazer, but it felt like a prop now, not a truth. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the tension. "I've spent years keeping the foundation alive while Vanessa took credit and took money." My family's heads snapped toward me, my aunt's mouth half open, my cousin Lila's eyes narrowing. Vanessa's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. I stepped forward, my heels clicking on the hardwood, and pointed at Vanessa. "She hacked my records to shame me, but I'm the one who secured a $500,000 grant to save Dad's legacy." The room gasped, and Vanessa's hands twitched, clutching her purse like a lifeline. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I opened an email from the grant board, time-stamped 3 years ago. "This proves it," I said, handing it to the bailiff who passed it to the judge. Vanessa's voice cracked. "That's not true," but her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering furiously. I didn't flinch, my gaze locked on the judge whose pen paused, her eyes sharp with interest. "I worked nights, hid the funds to protect them from her," I continued, my voice rising, "and she repaid me with this." I tapped the badge, my fingers brushing the word nobody. The judge's gaze flicked to Vanessa, whose composure was crumbling, her lips trembling. My uncle shifted in his seat, avoiding my eyes, while Lila whispered to her husband, her face flushed. I took a breath, my chest lighter, and said, "I'm not here for revenge, I'm here for the truth." The judge nodded, her expression unreadable but firm, and dismissed us for a brief recess. As I walked out, my family's stares followed, no longer mocking but stunned. Vanessa stayed seated, her head bowed, her empire of lies exposed. I pushed through the courtroom doors, my shoulders squared, the badge still pinned but powerless. I'd dismantled her facade, not with anger, but with the truth I'd carried all along. The courthouse hallway felt colder as I stepped out, the weight of the nobody badge still pinned to my chest, but its sting was gone. I slipped into a quiet corner, my back against the wall, and let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling from the adrenaline of facing Vanessa. My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Elena waiting outside. "You okay? We're here." I smiled, my fingers brushing the screen, and headed toward the exit. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, and Elena stood with my colleague Sam, both leaning against a bench, their faces lighting up when they saw me. Elena hugged me, her arms tight, and I felt the knot in my chest loosen. "You didn't let her win," she whispered, her voice warm, unlike the cold glares of my family inside. Sam handed me a coffee, his grin crooked. "Heard you dropped a bomb in there," he said, nodding toward the courthouse. I laughed, the sound surprising me, and sipped the coffee, its warmth steadying my hands. We sat on the bench, and I told them everything. Vanessa's lies, the DOJ's evidence, my moment at the stand. Elena's eyes widened, her hand squeezing mine, while Sam shook his head, muttering, "She's done." Unlike my family's calculated whispers, their support was raw, real, no strings attached. I glanced back at the courthouse, picturing Vanessa's stunned face, my uncle's averted gaze. They'd spent years picking me apart, but here, with Elena and Sam, I wasn't invisible. My fingers traced the badge, and I unpinned it, dropping it into my bag. "You don't need that," Elena said, her voice firm. She was right. These were my people, chosen, not bound by blood. The contrast hit hard, my family's betrayal versus this quiet loyalty. Sam checked his watch, reminding me of tomorrow's federal review for the foundation. "You've got this," he said, clapping my shoulder. I nodded, my resolve solidifying. The courthouse loomed behind us, but out here, with allies who saw me, I felt stronger than ever. The fight wasn't over, but I wasn't alone anymore. Back in my apartment that evening, the courthouse's echoes still rang in my ears. But I felt a new clarity, like a fog lifting. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, the screen glowing with emails about the Foundation's federal review tomorrow. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my mind was on the boundaries I needed to set. I pulled out my phone, my thumbs steady as I drafted a group text to my family, excluding Vanessa. "I'm done with the games. Support the Foundation or stay out of my way." I hit send, my heart pounding, but not with fear, with resolve. My uncle replied instantly, a vague, "Let's talk," but I ignored it, my jaw tight. I'd spent years bending to their expectations, swallowing their dismissals, but no more. I stood, pacing the small room, my socks soft against the hardwood, and caught my reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the girl who'd begged for their approval. I opened a notebook, scribbling new rules. No more uncredited work, no more tolerating their shade. My phone buzzed again. Lila, my cousin, with an apology. I didn't know Vanessa lied. I set the phone down, my fingers curling into a fist. Words weren't enough. Actions would prove them now. I turned back to my laptop, pulling up the Foundation's budget, my eyes scanning the numbers I'd fought to protect. Tomorrow's review could secure millions, and I'd lead it, not as nobody, but as the executive director Dad named. I thought of Vanessa, her face crumbling in court, and felt no pity. Only a fierce need to protect what I'd built. My coffee mug sat cold, but I didn't care. I was rewriting my role, not just in the Foundation but in my life. I blocked Vanessa's number, my finger pressing the screen with finality, and felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I hadn't noticed. The Foundation was mine to steer now, and I'd do it without their shadows. My hands steadied, and I typed a final email to the review board. My words sharp, confident. This was my line in the sand, and I wasn't stepping back. The next morning, I walked into the Foundation's office, my heels clicking on the polished floor, a stack of files under my arm. The judge's ruling had come late last night, reinstating me as executive director per Dad's will, and Vanessa's control was officially stripped. I set the files down, my fingers brushing the desk that had once been Dad's, now mine. The room smelled of fresh paint, a renovation I'd pushed for to signal a new start. I opened my laptop, pulling up the federal review presentation, my heart steady despite the stakes. This wasn't just about funding, it was about reclaiming the Foundation's mission, the one I'd saved in secret. My team filed in, their faces bright with trust, not doubt. Sam handed me a revised budget, his nod saying more than words. "You've got this, Carly," he said, and I believed him. My fingers tapped the desk, a rhythm of focus as I walked them through the plan, expanded shelters, youth programs, all rooted in Dad's vision. No one mentioned Vanessa, but her absence hung in the air, a ghost I no longer felt. I glanced at the framed photo of Dad on the wall, his smile warm, and felt him with me. My phone buzzed, a news alert about Vanessa's embezzlement charges, now public. I swiped it away, my focus on the screen, not her ruin. The review board arrived, and I stood, my voice clear, detailing every program, every dollar I'd fought for. Their nods felt like vindication, each one erasing a year of being called nobody. When they left, promising a decision soon, Sam clapped and the team cheered, their voices filling the room. I smiled, my hands unclenching, and realized I wasn't just running the Foundation, I was redefining it. I'd taken back my family's name, not for their approval, but for the communities we served. My fingers traced Dad's old pen on the desk, and I felt rooted, not in their legacy, but in mine. This was my impact, my terms, and no one could take that away. I stood on my apartment's balcony that evening, the city's lights flickering below, a cool breeze brushing my face. My fingers curled around a mug of tea, its warmth grounding me as I replayed the day's victory. The Federal Review had gone better than I'd dared hope. The board's email hinted at approval, and the foundation was secure. But it wasn't the funding that settled my heart. It was the quiet realization that I didn't need my family's validation anymore. I thought of Vanessa's downfall, her lies exposed, and felt no thrill of revenge, only relief. My hand slipped into my pocket, brushing the crumpled nobody badge I'd kept, not as a wound but a reminder. I'd spent years chasing their approval. Mom's nod, Vanessa's shadow. But out here, alone, I saw the truth. My worth was mine to define. I leaned against the railing, my shoulders relaxed, and remembered Dad's words. "You're enough, Carly." He'd seen it when I couldn't. The foundation wasn't just his legacy, it was my proof, built through sleepless nights and silent battles. I set the mug down, my fingers steady, and looked out at the skyline, each light a story, a struggle, a win. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself. The weight of their judgment, their betrayal had lifted, replaced by a peace I'd earned. I'd reclaimed my name, my work, my life. Not for them, but for me. So what do you think? Did I fight hard enough to reclaim my story, or could I have pushed further? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share a time you had to stand up for your own worth. Your stories inspire me, just like I hope mine inspires you. Don't forget to subscribe to Brim Revenge for more raw, real journeys like this one. Keep shining, keep fighting, because your voice matters, and no one can label you nobody unless you let them.